can we create this shield or this mesh so that the sugar is going through the drain a little slower? So she talks about not just what to eat, but how to eat and in what order. So I love this.
Nice.
And so right? The order of food matters.
In our last episode, we talked about how Western medicine meets traditional Chinese medicine in their thoughts around how the stress from the liver can impact our mental health. So if you're feeling exhausted, depressed, anxious, and you are wondering, is there something wrong with me? And perhaps you've gone to your family doctor and they've told you your liver enzymes are elevated, or you have fatty liver and an ultrasound, or perhaps they haven't told you any of that and you just simply plain and simple feel exhausted and your iron's fine and everything else is checking out okay. We recommend that you look at it from a Chinese medicine perspective. Like, look at what are your signs and symptoms? Do they add up to something that might indicate like a sluggish liver, which we talked more about in our last episode. So you might feel like, as I mentioned, fatigued and sluggish, belly weight gain, bloated, exactly, maybe pain or just like a weird feeling in the upper right abdomen. You might be binge eating and having no control around that. So what today we want to talk about is what are the foods we can what are the foods we can eat to help a person who's going through these feelings in the springtime when the liver is most active. And we talked about how it's better to kind of ease into this in ways you can kind of restore your energy before you start looking at food prepping, which is today's episode. What would a nutrition regime look like if you are in this state of sluggishness and bloating and you just have no idea what to do? So go back to last episode so you can kind of look at the restoration and like building a little bit of energy to then now let's talk about what foods would be taken out and then what foods would we be adding. So replacing processed foods is key. Obviously, people, not me necessarily obvious, but easier foods are often the foods that would probably not be very energy rejuvenating. So foods like muffins and croissants, donuts, those are the foods that many, many people will start their day off eating. The moment you remove those and give the body a break, your energy like skyrockets. I don't know if you've ever done this in your diet where you've taken out pastries 100% for a month, Mary, or desserts like after meals. Maybe you don't even eat that much of those foods to begin with.
Well, I'll just jump right in and I'm going to tell you, before I knew about any of this, right? I remember in my 20s and in TCM school, we were just, really talking about more like eating cooked foods and eating digestible foods. But I'm still having breakfasts that were like, could have been a muffin, right? And then I would have to drive to Mississauga. And I swear to you, every time I got in the car, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to take a nap. I'm driving and I'm in my 20s. So, and it didn't even clue in until it's like, oh my gosh, it's like literally this food that's making me so tired because, you'd have that crazy sugar spike and then I'm like exhausted, right?
Right.
So when I stopped doing that, and certainly now in my, I don't know if I'm in golden years, but in my more mature years, I've certainly cut that out. Not 100%, like maybe on a Sunday, I'll do like a croissant with my family, but I'll do it in a way that it's also not as sugar spiking. And I don't know if you know the book, Tanya, The Glucose Revolution.
Nope.
So Jessie Inchauspé, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but it's great because she addresses all that you speak to all the time, which is like avoid those processed foods and sugars. But the reality is that it is prevalent. And if you actually succumb and surrender to this, there's actually a way to decrease the sugar spike, even if you're eating it. And her thing, and I like this analogy, if you don't mind me going into this,
no,
where, if sugar, because it is quick sugar, it's like it goes down the drain and goes straight into our body and it gets dumped. So what she's saying is no matter what, it's going to go down the drain anyway. But could we slow down the drainage? So can we create this shield or this mesh so that the sugar is going through the drain a little slower? So she talks about not just what to eat, but how to eat and in what order. So I love this.
Nice.
And
like
so
that, the order.
Right? The order of food matters.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
again, it's called glucose revolution. And so you would take your fiber first, because literally fiber creates that little mesh. So this protective shield, so that when you have that first, then the sugar it'll slow down the sugar being digested in your body. And I thought, that's great. And I've done it as a science experiment now because of her, and it actually works. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in.
I know. I think it's fantastic. Since we're talking about books, I might as well jump into The Metabolic Reset, which I read recently by Dr. Alan Christensen. And his big thing is resistant starches, which is that same concept of slowing down blood sugars and having more fiber. And his concept too is not just, eating resistant starches, which basically are fiber-rich foods for slowing down the entrance of sugars into your bloodstream, but also so that we feed the good bacteria food, so that there's a shift in the metabolism in our gut, because there's an axis, which we call it like I'm sure you've heard of like the whole gut microbiome or good bacteria and the connection between that and our brain and how we think. So if you have good bacteria in our gut, we feel better in our mind. Well, there's also an axis like a gut-liver axis. And there's theories now that if your gut microbiome is depleted, perhaps we're not getting enough of those resistant starches, that it also exacerbates or makes the potential higher for you to get fatty liver or have liver issues. And then having liver issues then causes you to then crave more unhealthy. And then like the cycle goes on, you feel tired. And so it's like, how do we cut that? And how do we, create this like, kind of wake up feeling and start to, build stamina and endurance again and, get our sexy back and have energy. And sometimes it takes like a full 100% turnaround of strict elimination of that stuff. It's so easy to just show up to Tim Hortons or go to McDonald's drive-thru and grab a bagel or a donut, but you're not feeling good. And some people, as an example, a patient of mine who was diagnosed with, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and this person needed like a complete like reset. And within, a few days of following, this metabolic reset and a complete turnaround in energy, I was like shocked, and a 50% reduction in pain. And I see this, with patients, and over the years, I was always like, liver detoxification, you don't detoxify the liver per se, you're supporting the liver. We're actually taking things away so it just damages the liver less. The liver is basically the biggest organ. Actually,
it is the biggest.
It's the skin is the biggest organ of elimination technically.
Yes.
The liver does, with the kidneys, like they all have their own rules, but liver does a huge amount of elimination, and it needs to be in good, healthy condition to like bind up and eliminate waste and toxins. And if it's literally bound up by like fat and it's sluggish, the cells are being stressed by that fat and inflammation, like it's oxidative stress, it gets slow and lazy. So then you have a medication, you don't feel good taking that medication when you need it, or you need more medications to feel good, perhaps you're very inflamed and all joint pains and you're tired. So and then you're turning to Advil or NSAIDs as an example. I mean, there's a time and place for everything, but you get the picture. So cutting it completely. So cutting out those 100% for a month, and then going back to the kind of 80-20, more of a balanced nutrition regime. And his kind of argument is that, people don't necessarily always have the time to make, 2 or 3 nutritious meals. So he says, turn into protein shakes for a couple for 4 weeks and put in your nutritious, like nutrient dense greens like cilantro and parsley that support your liver, and citrus peel, which has evidence behind it for the antioxidant support on the liver regeneration. and then put in some resistant starch, something that you can, like, it is processed like banana, powder, dehydrated, and add in some like resistant fiber. You can also do this without protein powders and like pea protein and beef protein powders. You can just do it exclusively through preparing meals, but from a time perspective and from an assimilation, like easeability on the gut, it might be easier to do like 2 protein shakes and 1 main balanced Mediterranean style meal to kind of shed some weight and give your brain a break from making meals and physical health. Like, sometimes people don't have that energy to like chop vegetables, and they might not even have the ability to digest some of the foods that is indicated for the liver, like the brassica family, like the broccoli and cauliflower and cruciferous family. They're so nutritious and helpful for the liver and for our bodies, but sometimes people are lacking the good bacteria that create the enzymes to break the food down. So it's like starting off with metabolic resets, and some of the most increased or highest foods and resistant starches would be like oats, brown rice, other grains like millet, seeds like quinoa, beans and legumes, which a lot of people have a hard time breaking down. Again, they get bloated, and it could be they're lacking the good bacteria to do that. So you kind of have to ease into this. Potatoes and sweet potatoes. And we're talking like foods in their non-processed form, so that you're not kind of eating things like chips that are high in saturated fats, which would also damage and affect the liver if you're over consuming. So potatoes, would you ever overeat potatoes, boiled potatoes, if you cook them, Mary, versus a bag of chips? Like, I'm sure you won't let me to kind of overeat, right?
Right. Well, it's done for a reason, though, right? When it's a bag of chips, there's lots of salt in it. Salt, and you'll have more craving, and you'll just want more and more and more.
And you'll buy more.
And you buy more. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I just want to go back, because I love what you're saying. And for those people that are, interested in reading these books or listening to them on Audible, which is what I do these days.
Me too.
To consume everything sometimes can be also overwhelming, and I'll even add in a bit confusing. So the reason why I say this, and you actually mentioned this really well, it's like everyone is different, and they're in a different place, and they have different digestive capacities. So why I say there can be confusion is in the first book that you're mentioning. Sorry, what is it called?
The metabolic reset.
Metabolic
diet.
Reset. Yeah. So they talk and they talk about smoothies and stuff. Well, in the glucose revolution, they actually want to kind of steer away from smoothies, and they both make sense, and we'll distinguish why, because Tanya addressed this, but I want it to be crystal clear so you guys get this. So the smoothies are really great, especially for those that have digestive challenges. It's hard for you to break down food. It's just and easier for time, for sure, right? But if you're a person that actually you're digesting pretty good and you have a smoothie, what will happen is it can be like a quick sugar, because everything's already pulverized. So the fiber's already broken down. It's already pre-digested. So when you drink it, it's like, after like an hour, you're like, still hungry, and then you want to eat more, right? So she's saying it's like, instead of a smoothie, like maybe you could like eat your fiber, and so then you can chew more. So like if you're putting spinach in your smoothie, it's like, why can't you just eat it? Right?
Right. Yes, for sure. And if you are somebody who has a hard time digesting, I would even be cautious to what grains you are adding in the smoothie. Like kale might not be a good choice over spinach, for example. And in a shake he's suggesting, it's not only like fruit, like, tiny bit of fruit, a little bit of a small amount of banana, for example, the citrus peel, it could be beets, it could be, some kind of healthy resistant starch to slow down the entrance. And then there's protein. So you actually do feel full. And I'm somebody who does normally get hungry after having something like a protein shake. But if you're adding all the ingredients, you do feel full. But you also have free foods between, which would include green beans and vegetables like, carrot fries, yam fries, things like you're making from at home to perhaps prep for your dinners. and then having leftovers throughout the day between meals if you are hungry, because the goal is to kind of also have a caloric deficit so that your liver can kind of, get rid of the fatty liver and reduce the inflammation. So you're focusing on foods that are restorative for the liver. If you have the time, you can also simply clean up your diet and make fancy meals for yourself that are based on these foods with high resistant starches. I recommend, food prepping brown rice and quinoa and root vegetables like brown rice and beans and root vegetables separately, maybe on a Monday and a Wednesday. So you have those healthy, high resistant carbohydrates so that it's, you're not then turning something quick like pasta or bread, because the goal is to cut that for the month so that you can get a big change in energy, perhaps a drop in the bloating and restoring your good bacteria flora and improving your energy. And all of a sudden, like now you have the energy to kind of do maintenance cooking and such, like you don't have to be so perfect. And when you have, a donut or a banana, a donut or a muffin, you don't feel tired after it eventually or put on 5 pounds looking at it.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So then when you're doing the food prep and you're making it for a couple of days, how long do those little grains last that is cooked?
I would say 5 days in the fridge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I do it too. So
Don't
you
go
guys,
past that.
it's not like, oh, I'm going to make it for 2 weeks and it's okay, because that's actually so bad as well. Nothing lasts
bananas,
forever.
you would freeze half a banana or into quarters. Your berries can be frozen. I would keep organic spinach fresh. Cilantro and, parsley can be chopped and last for 5 days as well. Your goal is to go through the foods and then, when you're hungry, intentionally eat something you've prepped and reheat it, make it tasty with like recipes that, perhaps are a part of your culture too. And so you enjoy it, and then branch out a little bit, learn some new things and try to, go bold and try 2 new recipes a week. So, and then take pictures of the foods you like. So you have a little menu for your future if you ever want to do it again.
Cool. That's a great tip. So I hope that's helpful. And, you're just sparking another interest of like, oh, next time, two things that we could talk about actually the probiotics, right? Doing a deep dive about that, because people get confused, I think.
Yes.
And how to supplement and what it's really for. And then the second piece, it's like, do we really need to go organic and why and what, right? So I think we can do deep dives on those, because I think that's all confusing. I still get patients often, they'll say, oh gosh, like, I don't really know. And my husband doesn't believe in organic because, it's a scam, a lot of the stuff, right? So it's like, what do we really look for and how to be healthy while not being sucked into marketing? I don't know about you, but I love this episode because I think it's like full of practical things. It's like people are always wondering, oh my gosh, what should I do? What should I eat? And I think this is very practical. So thank you for doing that. And if you guys love this episode, do share, because other people are confused, and maybe this is a way to convince your loved ones to eat better as well if they're like frustrating you to no end.